Before I start, I just want to apologize for not fulfilling my time expectation for the release of this video, as this script turned out to be a lot more work than I had anticipated. Editing the last video alone took about 3 days after a month of brainstorming and trying to turn a bunch of chat logs with my friend, Chef Umaril, into a functional script. Being that I had already had the last video mostly written before starting to do more theorizing, I decided to use the bulk of my findings in this video to make the videos a bit shorter, as well as organize my thoughts better as to what I found interesting in PythonSelkan's videos versus what I found interesting in the source material on my own. Anywho, if you're watching this video, you should have watched part 1 beforehand. If you didn't,
may God have mercy on your soul.
So, where to begin? Well, I'll start by saying that unlike my last video, I'm not going to so much advertise PNS as much as add my own thoughts to the pool. To reiterate from my last video, if you haven't seen PythonSelkan's videos, you should probably get a bit of a head start into that to at least get an idea of what I'm talking about here. Though if you watch this video, I recommend watching PythonSelkan's videos afterward. If you remember it, it should make a lot more sense afterward. I only say if you remember it because the length of this video and the last combined pales in comparison to the amount of content PythonSelkan have put out. Keep in mind, while watching this, a lot of these theories I'm about to present are simply possibilities that ran through my mind. I don't necessarily agree with all of the possible outcomes as actually probable, I'm just putting them out there for your consideration. Also, this video was co-written with my longtime friend Chef Umaril. He doesn't have a YouTube, nor does he want his face or voice to be on the internet, but I wanted to credit him and he said his username was fine. With all that said, let's jump right in. First things first, you're going to want to obtain MS-DOS games. Let's get to the real meat and potatoes of the matter. I'm going to go ahead and start with what initially pushed me to make this video, even though it was over a month ago at this point. There was an update to MGS5 on August 1st, which while updates normally aren't considered news, this one had Ocelot. More accurately, it added Ocelot as an option in the FOB infiltration mode. After watching PythonSelkan's videos, I felt like it was a sign that something was hiding inside the MGS5 files, especially considering some of PythonSelkan's finds regarding data miners finding hidden files. I've got some experience with modding tools, I can figure this out. Well, I found some interesting stuff, but there's so much to dig through I didn't find much without spending unreasonable amounts of time digging through all of the files. The update on August 1st was around 600 megabytes in size and added weapon upgrades, a wormhole generator, winking intensifies, and a few other things. What was initially most notable to me was when I started digging in the files, I found a lot of incomplete texture files. By this I don't mean corrupted files, I mean multi-part files that are missing files. To explain, the textures in MGS5 are held in two file types, .ftex and .ftexs. The .ftex files are the image layers, and the .ftexs file is essentially the key that binds the ftex files into a Photoshop-friendly file, a PSD. It generally looks like this. You have the .ftexs file and the 1 to 4 of the .ftex files. What intrigued me the most was that there are a ton of .ftex files that are missing the ftexs file, and file 1 leaving only files 2 and 3. Could this possibly be another sign that Chapter 3 is yet to come? Disarm your nukes, and steal nukes to disarm them from other players. Something that surprised me, on August 21st, 3 days before Hideo Kojima's birthday, there was an update that went uncovered, both in the changelog and in the press. This was updated just before midnight, meaning that it would have been 2 days before Kojima's birthday. On top of this, there's a folder that isn't available in my texture file path library that I downloaded, which should have been up to date until August. Even further in, I found a few very interesting finds. Inside 00.dat, assets, TPP, pack, mission 2, story, S110, and then extract S110 underscore line 01.fpk, and inside there, assets, TPP, Kara, and what have we here? Ish? Like Ishmael? Inside Ish and inside scenes appeared only the model files. I backed out to the Mission 2 folder, then opened Story, S110, and yup, that was Ishmael. There's speech data for Ishmael, as well as something called Mob and Ocelot. Digging further, I backed out to the TPP folder, into Motion, MTAR, and there are 4 folders: Cypress, Hostage 2 Mob, Ishmael 2, and Player 2. I'm assuming based on the file types and the folder name that these are motion tracking files, but this is still really cool. Cypress is the hospital that you start at in the very beginning of the game. Ishmael comes back into the story, and there may even be a co-op mode to come? In Mission 2, Story, S150, S150 Area 1 FPKD, Assets, TPP, Level, Mission 2, Story, S150, there are various Lua files. On those files, there's a lot of references to killing Quiet. Is that finally going to happen? I mean, she was pushing the envelope quite often and pissed Kaz off thoroughly on multiple occasions, so it was only a matter of time. There's also references to Huey being interrogated, but that kinda already happened. And they released him out into the wilds, so that doesn't seem new. Be free, my engineer. Traitorous swell! Hang on, let me just get a bit more comfortable for this.
Consecutive! C! Q! C!
That's the boss I know. You're pretty good.
There's a lot of files to go through, and it would take me a lot more time than it's worth to dig through all of it. But needless to say, there's some good hints hidden inside 00.dat, inside master/0, and chunk_0.dat, inside the MGO folder. That's about all I found in the MGS files. Let's take a look at other sources for speculation. I want to discuss some of the possible allusions to Metal Gear, as well as Death Stranding, that are noticeable in the Oats Studios videos. We'll start off slow and discuss the smaller videos first. Cooking with Bill is a multi-part series where the host, Bill, demonstrates some new kitchen appliances, similar to Billy Mays,
God rest his soul.
God rest his soul.
God rest his
God
soul.
rest his soul.
God rest his
God
soul.
rest his soul.
or Vince Offer from ShamWow, or the Slapchop, whatever you know him from. There has already been a video by PythonSelkan discussing the first video in the series, but they haven't followed up yet, and there have been several videos since then. You can find that video here in the card, as its context will be important for this video. As PythonSelkan had noted, Damasu is Japanese for to trick or to deceive. So with that in mind, there are a lot of things happening that aren't exactly as they seem. In the first video, Bill has an accident with Damasu and slices his hand to hell. It definitely looks like his show career is over. But wait, there's more! In the following Cooking with Bill, there is some anticipation if you are paying keen attention to his hand. It's initially obscured by the Magiblend 200, leaving the audience thinking that perhaps he is using a false hand now and prefers not to show it. This drags on for almost a minute, then at just about the 45-second mark, they reveal that his hand is, in fact, still intact. How the hell did he recover his hand? Look at it! It looks worse than when they shot up Hitler in Inglourious Bastards! Or maybe not, that's... Okay, he's dead. Okay, stop! Since his hand is back, let's turn back to PythonSelkan's analysis of the PT demo. Every time Jareth dies or the game crashes, it appears that you have been restarted from the beginning, but an important note is that the cockroach that was there when you first came into the room is gone now. It seems to me that the loop is still looping, and that now you're playing as another version of Jareth. To me, this points to the possibility that Bill is in his own personal hell, similar to Silent Hill or Death Stranding. There are a few things in Cooking with Bill that seem to be pointing to this as well, while also having themes that are reminiscent of Metal Gear's message, particularly history repeats itself. The same intro every time, same setting, and the final Cooking with Bill titled Smoothie feels a bit like a combination of 3 events, similar to how MGS4 feels like a combination of MGS1 through MGS3. Its name even implies that it's a combination of things. On top of this, the introductory "Has this ever happened to you?" bit at the beginning of each episode may also be linked to history repeating itself. On the topic of MGS4, back to PythonSelkan's analysis of Oats Studios, Cooking with Bill is rather reminiscent of one of those strange shows in the intro of MGS4, particularly the one with a cooking theme. It is an entirely different concept, but the theme is the same, and considering Kojima, themes are often the only linking thread. It could, however, be hinting that this is being filmed in that same era or later, and he got a bionic replacement, as that kind of technology isn't unheard of by 2014 in the Metal Gear universe. Backing up a bit to the Smoothie episode, out of the 4 Cooking with Bill shows, it's the only one where the sight of it didn't immediately make him disgusted, not to mention the strange effect applied to the audio at this point. He only became disgusted after he noticed the hair in his mouth. Prior to this, he had been disgusted by all of the results of the appliances, hurting himself, seeing a tray of guts, sushi held together by hair, but the smoothie actually appeared succulent to him. I'm not sure of the significance of this, but it seems to me that either Bill didn't notice the hair even though Karen did, or he started losing it in this Groundhog Day hell. There are a few moments where Bill's assistant Karen's performance is a bit questionable as to her intent. It's possible that in Bill's life, she was an aggressor, pining after his position and feeling not only threatened and intimidated by him, but also jealous that he got the job simply because he's the man in the situation. It could also be that he just perceived her that way because of some deep-seated misogyny, and he projected that onto her, creating this apparition in his personal hell. That's some pretty heavy speculation as to the backstory of the nature of their relationship, but it seems possible given the setting, her attitude at points, and her lack of reaction at points. Also, keeping in mind the human entrails and hair as well as the theme of cooking, is it possible that Bill is stuck in this hell because in life he was a cannibal? If so, it's possible that he was controlled by aliens, as theorized by PythonSelkan about Silent Hill's Death Stranding. It's also possible that the Damasu was his just desserts. He butchered people, so he butchered himself. Not to mention, the smoothie is just about the right color to contain blended body parts, but it's not the right shades, so it's uncertain if he's consuming human organs at this point, though the hair is still a gross touch. Perhaps if we adjusted the brightness to where it didn't look like stage lighting, we'll see a different picture. So after a couple of adjustments, adjusting the contrast, brightness, and saturation, it almost seems like it could be the right color, but I'm not gonna call that, as it's definitely entrails. It does look a little bit similar, but it's a little bit too pink, in my opinion, but I'd have no idea. Alright, next we'll talk about God Serengeti, the lone short about, well, it would appear to be God ruling over a small group of Neanderthals living on his table. Granted, it's a bit more complicated than that, but that's about the gist of it. At any rate, there's a line in the video that stands out to me above the rest.
More, I suppose. Does have a good recipe for a black hole there.
Lovely.
While the wording only conclusively ties it to the black hole blasted on Mads Mikkelsen's rifle, scientists have yet to understand what black holes actually do to something drawn into one. As noted to me by Chef Umaril, No Man's Sky's interpretation of a black hole is that it's simply a wormhole to another galaxy, so it's not completely out of the question. There's also the fact that Metal Gear Survive has a black hole that sucks up some of the Diamond Dogs into a possibly underwater dimension. Not to mention the black hole that apparently now spawns in the zombies shown at Gamescom 2017, at a no-footage press booth. So it could still be a reference, even if it's less direct than most everything else. It also reminds me of the strange shows in MGS4, just like Cooking with Bill does. There's another line that stands out to me. It's not as much of a correlation to MGS or Death Stranding, more just an interesting line.
No! Too precious. Release the plague, Jeffrey.
Could that be God's judgment of their joy at the sight of the rain? Not just a response to the adorable cavemen? Almost as though God just wants to watch the world burn. Perhaps it's indicative of the alien attitude toward uninitiated humans. Next up, Fluke. This is another rather short video by Oats Studios. It features a couple of scientists/engineers demonstrating a new device called the Fluke, which is essentially a dart loaded in a shotgun shell that allows the user to remote control an assailant. It's not the most functional in terms of controlling the assailant in a stable or believable manner, but it serves its function as a distraction, confusion tactic, and remote detonatable bomb dressed up as a friendly. What's interesting to me about this one is that the movement of the test subject resembles quite closely the movement of the skulls and those affected by the skulls. I'm speculating that it could be similar tech, or at least similar methodology as the tech shown in the skull suits, but with the added benefit of the suicide function, as well as not needing a whole group of engineers to install the suit along with whatever else goes into converting people into the skulls. It's possible that if PythonSelkan's theories about the Konami Nadi and the rest are right, or at least close to the money, then when Chapter 3 is made available to the public, we may end up with access to similar technology in the R&D department. Not only because of the similarities to the Skull's tech, but also because Kaz mentions that they're looking into mind control techniques, which may be related to this. Alright, enough of the small stuff, let's move on to Firebase, as it appears to be chronologically the earliest to have occurred. It's also one of the meatier places to dig for clues. Right off the bat, we're hit with a quote from the Bible, specifically Hebrews 13:14. "This world is not our permanent home. We are looking forward to a home yet to come." This almost makes me think exactly of Big Boss's philosophy for Outer Heaven and Militaire Sans Frontières.
We will forsake our countries. We will leave our motherlands behind us and become one with this earth. We have no nation, no philosophy, no ideology. We go where we're needed, fighting not for country, not for government, but for ourselves. We are soldiers without borders, our purpose defined by the era we live in. If the times demand it, we'll be revolutionaries, criminals, terrorists, and yes, we may all be headed straight to hell. But what better place for us than this? It is our only home, our heaven, and our hell. This is Outer Heaven.
But maybe saying yet to come is alluding to the continuation of Metal Gear Solid 5? Immediately after that, we've got floating people, tanks, etc., reminiscent of the end of the first Death Stranding trailer showing 5 people floating symmetrically in the sky. And then, oh my god, this guy totally looks like Snake down to the bandana, and it takes place in 1970, prior to the Peace Walker incident! Outer fucking Heaven. Well, it's technically not Outer Heaven. There is a gesture cap, but it's too close to ignore as a coincidence. You see the full thing about 6.5 minutes in. The cinematography also reminds me a lot of Ground Zeroes when Skullface is getting into the helicopter. Jacob Palmer, this guy, also kinda reminds me of Grey Fox, just with a shirt on under his vest, which may be alluding to PythonSelkan's theory about Venom being Grey Fox. Also, this helicopter scene reminds me of the helicopter sequence between Mother Base and Flying to Your Mission, being briefed. The overall theme of infected soldiers reminds me a lot of the Skulls, but it also reminds me of Metal Gear Survive. In the past, I've said some pretty crass things about Metal Gear Survive, but if PythonSelkan is right about all of this, I rescind everything I've ever said and will give it a shot. The gameplay does look fun, and having a co-op Metal Gear again should be fun. Also, the story Bracket tells seems to be related to Wormhole's, considering he was in one place and then immediately in another. Moving on, at 1408, there's a vehicle with something written in Russian on it. I did everything I could to draw the letters into Google Translate. The letters I came up with did match, and it appears to read as, all of a sudden. This could just be Blomkamp's affinity for using other languages and native jargon as a clever way to make foreshadowing and references, but it seems like another hint that something is going to happen soon in regards to all of this Konami nonsense. At 1538, Brackett's platoon has glowing eyes and is behaving like a bunch of zombies, closely resembling the soldiers controlled by the skulls. We'll touch back on it in Raqqa, but the River God could essentially be Patient Zero for the aliens in Raqqa. With the Russians' involvement, however, he became different. Note the device on the back of the River God's spine. Could it be how the aliens were able to give him powers, reminiscent of "you can join us at any time"?
Låt oss välja. Min röst som förtäljer framtiden eller dina plågade ögon. Nå, vad väljer du? Du kan välja. Ditt liv. Din framtid. Klok som du är, så kanske du redan upptäckte. Ja, radiodramat från 75 år sedan var sanning. De är här på vården. Och de övervakar och ser allt. Lita ej på mig. Lita ej på polisen. De är redan kontrollerade av dem. Så har det varit i 75 år nu. Endast vår mästare kan hålla dem. Du har en rätt. En rätt att bli en av oss. Så välkommen till vår värld. Mycket snart öppnas portarna till en ny dimension. 204863. 204863.
The brainlocks seem to be lower tech variations, possibly an unintended or reverse engineered derivative of the relativity capsule made for Heinz. At 1650, there's an odd moment that reminds me of the opening to MGS5 because the top of the guy is wearing here looks like Scrubs, and he says,
"As of this moment, Firebase Tar Heel never existed."
Tar Heel refers to North Carolina and its inhabitants, where Brackett is from, which is kind of odd. The line he spoke also reminds me of the tape at the ending of MGS5, from the man who sold the world, where Big Boss says,
"From here on out, you're Big Boss."
Granted, that could be a hallucination as covered by PythonSelkan, but it's still vaguely reminiscent. At 1728, there's a Rhodesian Ridgeback for a short moment off to the side, reminding me of the advertisement material for MGS5. Seconds after, a torture scene similar to Kaz being tortured. Shortly after that, there's a mirror moment similar to the ending of MGS5 with the River God, who looks like a demon. 1930.
Who are you? What are you becoming? These details are slipping away from you, aren't they? I can help.
Possibly an allusion to Venom? And possible story arc of someone trying to undo the brainwashing? At 2022, there's peace symbols on the soldiers' helmets, and stories of the soldiers talking about the protagonist as though he's under divine influence.
I spoke to soldiers in your previous unit. I've heard all the accounts about you. Heinz isn't meant to die. Heinz is protected by a divine hand. Objects were put in your path to shield you. Put there to protect you at exactly the right moment. To shield you from the right piece of shrapnel. It's almost as if life itself knew you were coming.
There's a lot of talk like that about Big Boss and Solid Snake, I tell you what. Not to mention, in the same minute, Heinz sounds an awful lot like David Hayter here, but his actor does not sound like David Hayter at all.
The universe keeping you alive, saving you, as though it has a plan for you.
Weird. 2152, possible allusion to Skullface, Big Boss, and Solid as Snake? By that I mean that in MGS4 there's a huge shit fit about the remains of Big Boss, but when you actually see the remains, you wouldn't know it, but it's Solidus. You wouldn't know it because he has no fucking face, and muscle, and identical DNA to Big Boss. There's also hints to more gadgets, particularly the relativity capsule.
Put on the whole armor of God, that you may be able to stand against the schemes of the devil.
That about concludes discussion about Firebase. Moving on to Raqqa. There's not much I can say about Raqqa that hasn't already been said by PythonSelkan, but to recap from earlier, the River God seems to be patient zero for the aliens in Raqqa, as someone who had possibly joined willingly to gain their powers. That being said, the aliens seem to have brought back a black amorphous tar with them that floats, similar to the crawling handprints of the baby in the first trailer for Death Stranding. One thing that stands out to me with no real resolution or further explanation is the angels. They're mentioned and shown briefly, but they aren't shown to be defending like they were spoken of. They might just be an allusion to Amir, but that seems unlikely to me considering these shorts are self-contained short films that are more of a window into the world rather than a full picture. That's really about all I have for Raqqa, so let's move on to Zygote, the final Oats Studios film for the time being. The film starts with a shot of the logo for this mining company, Cerberus. Considering Kojima's love for symbolism, is this hinting that there may indeed be a third big boss? Watch PythonSelkan's videos for more information on that theory. Moving on, there's a quote right at the beginning that reminds me a lot of Firebase and Raqqa, particularly the River God and aliens.
Oh, something's alright. I feel like there's a light. There's a light inside of me. Like it's shining out from me. Something's wrong. It was Richard. I know what he means now. I feel like that. Corla, he cut one of those things open and had 40 rat brains inside, just linked together, making a working breed. His whole book, you see, he stole pigs from the pens. He cut the pig's organs out and stuck them all together in sheep organs. He made those things. It was a light. It's the light. He told him to, it made him. And all broke. He cut up all those miners. He cut them all up. And he made that big one out of them. I felt it right away.
This kind of confirms the combination of both the man-made and the attempt at recreating the River God. Just after, he's saying basically that he didn't cut his eyes out in time. The light is the creature's mind control, probably perceived as radiation, resulting in a form of infection in our dimension. Reminds me of the law of observation in a way. It both is and is not there when not under observation, but it is or is not there when under observation. Another interesting quote from the beginning.
Synthetics. They cost more than orphans. He purchased you from the Strata Group. Company bought you when you were 2 weeks old. They're fucking human, Barkley.
Possible allusion to Metal Gear Solid 4 and Rising Revengeance? Metal Gear Solid 4 deals with the topic of child soldiers. Similar to Jack, Rising Revengeance shows them building brainwashed cyborgs powered only by the eyes and the brains of orphans. I didn't notice this without the subtitles. When John opens the door to the next area, the computer says,
Security on. John Quinn.
This explains why his fingerprint doesn't work when she tries to override the vault. Also, John Quinn. John is Big Boss's real name. Quinn, similar to Quentin Flynn. Probably not related, but possible nods? For those unaware, Quentin Flynn is the voice of Raiden. This may actually be hinting how Venom dies. John Quinn, a combination of Big Boss and Raiden, a person trained in the image of Solid Snake, the person who was cloned in the image of Big Boss. Jack, as far as I have found, is just a nickname for John in Metal Gear's case. Yes, on the mission he's John Doe, not very original, but his real name is actually John. So I'm about to go into Low Roar's music and its possible references to Metal Gear that haven't been covered by PythonSelkan yet. But first, I wanted to recap and cover some of the instances and mentions of wormholes or black holes, from those working with Kojima as well as Kojima's recent works. In Metal Gear Solid 5, there is a wormhole device as a replacement Fulton, as well as how you begin infiltration in FOB infiltration mode. On top of this, it's possible that the device Guillermo del Toro holds in the second trailer for Death Stranding is not only an incubator, but also a wormhole device. This was also covered by PythonSelkan, how the baby disappears out of Ritas' hand and into the device Del Toro holds. Granted, there's a 30-second gap, but you can line them up and the music fits both. I made a joke about it in my "Wow! Me an Answer" video, but in Low Roar's music video, Forgive Me an Answer, the 0 on the door they enter initially looks a bit too similar to the icon for the wormhole device in MGS5. I'm not going to go terribly in depth into the video as PythonSelkan already covered it, but he didn't mention the similarities to the wormhole icon. PythonSelkan, as well as many others, did however tie the bathroom they go into to the bathroom from PT, and the paper bag with what seemed to be a head inside saying,
"The gap in the door. It's a separate reality."
There's also a wormhole incident in the Firebase short from Oats Studios, where Brackett gets teleported from the landing strip into the middle of the jungle. Not to mention, God in the Oats Studios short God Serengeti mentions a recipe for a black hole. It's also possible that Metal Gear Survive's story starts with a black hole taking some of the Diamond Dogs to another dimension, as the trailer shows a bunch of the Diamond Dogs being sucked into a mysterious wormhole/black hole. Also, as I mentioned before, this year's Gamescom demo for Metal Gear Survive featured a black hole that the zombie waves are spawned in from. Alright, that's all the references I can think of relating to wormholes and black holes. Let's move on to Low Roar's lyrics. I wasn't able to come up with an interpretation for everything, but I did my best to cover what I could, however loose it seemed. Easy Way Out, I'll Keep Coming, and Give Me an Answer have been fairly well covered by PythonSelkan, though I have a few things to add at certain points. First, let's look at the songs that sound like direct communication from Kojima to the fans. Keep in mind, like most things Kojima, things can have multiple meanings and not just multiple interpretations. Anyway, I'll Keep Coming definitely comes off as direct communication, though at this point being the first album, it was a lot more cryptic than the later material. Soon I'll come around, lost and never found, waiting for my words, seen but never heard.
Death Stranding and the deal with PlayStation and all this stuff. You've done more interviews than I think I've ever seen you do for any of your games coming up. And somehow you are doing all of these interviews and not saying a goddamn thing about the game you're working on.
Buried underground, but I'll keep coming. Definitely reminiscent of the Konami story. Kojima being put in solitude in his office, only being able to communicate to his staff through another staff member who would relay messages for him. Please Don't Stop Chapters 1 and 2 share the same lyrics, though Chapter 2 cuts off short from the lyrics of Chapter 1, similar to how Chapter 2 and MGS5 seem to cut short of a final conclusion. It seemed more like a point where Venom reached a climax as a character that would have resulted in some very interesting story moments of an aware, brainwashed soldier, and hopefully still will. The lyrics themselves also seem like a direct communication to the fans. Keep words away from my mouth, nothing I say now will help, because if all I have to lose is standing in my way, it's you I'll have to choose. But please don't take it the wrong way, please don't take it wrong. My heart is changing, hollow, my face is aging, chain my love. And then it repeats the second stanza. He's trying to keep a big secret a surprise until the right time, similar to Big Boss's resurgence. So being interviewed about the game isn't going to help because he has to be cryptic in order to not give it away. This is a stark contrast from when MGS5 was announced and they started showing off several hours of content. Granted, it was staged demos, but it still showed a lot of content compared to the 2 trailers and a few bits of advertising material we have for Death Stranding. Half Asleep overall reminds me of the loop and waking up on the floor in PT, as well as the difficulty of the puzzles. That's about it. I'm Leaving, however, seems to bear some significance to both Silent Hill and Metal Gear. The circus of repeating clowns sounds like history repeating itself over a crown, possibly alluding to the
philosopher's legacy.
Chorus of repeating sounds, time to make the ugly lovely and the lovely ugly, possibly a reference to doublethink or a revolution. The stanza after this seems to be pointing in the direction of Silent Hill, referencing sirens, like the air raid siren denoting a change to the hellscape Silent Hill is known for. Time will make me into something, then into nothing. This could be just a philosophical thing about how we may amount to something in our lifetime, but ultimately we all die. Following the Silent Hill route, however, it seems to be alluding to the difficulty in getting good at the gameplay, but inevitably just being stuck in Silent Hill. The rest of the song just repeats, "So I'm leaving, I'm leaving, I'm leaving." After the rest of that song, it sounds like a case of denial about being stuck for eternity. Phantoms was mentioned by PythonSelkan, but primarily in name without much interpretation. The lyrics, however, definitely sound like allusions to MGS5. Please, I need parts, like the resources you need to collect to craft new weaponry and expand Mother Base. Stolen, crawling, wandering through this world, alluding to MGS5's open world, stealing enemy supplies, and sneaking around. Hardly flailing around, probably because Venom was trained under the legendary Big Boss and brainwashed to know his depth of CQC, so he doesn't struggle much. The rest of the lyrics, I'm simply just interpreting as sneaking and keeping a level head. However, it could be alluding to something more with the mention of an airplane. Anything you need seems to be alluding to Ludens and the whole "you are welcome to join at any time" thing. Dreamers seems like it could be a reference to either Venom or Jareth, as Jareth was likely abducted by aliens and probed, possibly inhibiting Jareth's ability to move. As far as the resemblance to Venom, Venom was brainwashed, so I'm pretty sure his perception is a bit more than fucked. Not to mention the giant fucking piece of shrapnel causing hallucinations. Anyway, the second stanza seems to be alluding to Big Boss's dream of outer heaven, as it says, "I was a dreamer, a dandelion prophet. Wherever the wind blows, well, that's where I'm headed." Which is reminiscent of how Big Boss was idolized by his men, and how they went where the money and the right thing to do took them. At least that's what they wanted.
Well, he stabilized, but it took
the final stanza seems to be Big Boss keeping true to his word. When Big Boss is in a coma, so is Venom to the world. The brainwashing keeps Venom from being his own person, instead destined to tread the path of Big Boss's shadow. Vampire on my fridge is very cryptic, but if I were to guess, it's about Venom being in the hospital, recovering from the severe trauma. The second stanza seems to be the new Mother Base after they had lost the first one. It could even be referencing the original Mother Base, considering the line, "where the weed's overgrown." "Am I in over my head" is probably referring to a moment of clarity and regret, choosing to become Big Boss's body double. The fourth stanza screams to me that it's talking about the tape Big Boss sent, which may, as I mentioned, be a hallucination, but that's still unconfirmed as of yet. Anyway, if the tape is real, Big Boss sent it from his new Mother Base, where Venom has no clue to the location. From Low Roar's self-titled album, the first song, Give Up's lyrics, sound a bit like a subtle hint to the fans to look into the lyrics for clues, particularly the second stanza, highlighting the importance of music. The two stanzas after that sound like Kojima addressing his public appearances, and how he left MGS unfold. The third stanza, pleading for us not to give up on him, sounds pretty straightforward with everything else in mind. Don't give up on MGS5 yet, Chapter 3 is yet to come. Just a Habit's lyrics are very interesting in their resemblance to PT. The reference to bugs, like the cockroach upon first opening PT, holes, like the crack in the door being a hole to another reality or the peepholes. On top of this, the quote, "any word said to you," possibly in reference to the solution of the second puzzle, mentioned in the last video. Jareth holds a liquored puzzled truth. Puzzled truth. PT. Another clue to look for hints? Also, the reference to alcohol is probably relevant in terms of Jareth as a character. should we assume that is his name, as I still hold true. This is further reinforced by the third stanza, his apologetic nature about his alcoholism, yet refusal to put it down. This may have been a part of why he was chosen, his underlying anger and aggression. Nobody else's lyrics are reminiscent to me of a few other things. History repeats itself in multiple ways here. It almost sounds like the plan to have Big Boss develop Outer Heaven while Venom acts in his place on the world stage, but also as Kojima is still acting under the guise of being solely independent, not collaborating with Konami. If you've watched through PythonSelkan's video and are still here, then you're probably well aware that this is shaping not to be the case, however improbable it may seem. That Kojima, as the vice president of Konami, has pulled the wool over our eyes, with deceptive tactics employing the assistance of the mainstream gaming press, particularly Jeff Keighley as a collaborator. Moving on, the second stanza is also a case of history repeats itself, as per the Konami Naughty ruse. Konami doesn't feel confident creating a mainline MGS game without Kojima's attentive hand at the helm, without risking pissing off the fans. These next two stanzas are pretty blatant to me, referencing the past, shining light on it, again, history repeats itself. The second stanza is pointing to the series possibly getting out of control regarding to writing it to continue making sense. On top of this, the final stanza is 8 lines long. 6 lines say there's nobody else, and the first and last say I swear that it won't happen again. This is incredibly grasping at straws for this part, but there are 8 canon entries into the Metal Gear saga, if you count Ground Zeroes and the Phantom Pain as the same game, which overall it is. There are 2 times that Kojima has had to hand the reins to the team at Konami, after MGS2 for the development of MGS3, and then after MGS5 when he made the separate Kojima production studio. All the other times, there was nobody else who could take the job, and really there is no one else who can write the story to the same quality and cohesion as he did. Patience is interesting because it draws some dualities in my head between Venom and Jareth. In regard to Jareth, the get out of my mind part sounds like the aliens probing around his brain, similar to what was shown prior in the Raka segment, or even perhaps being flung into the true reality. That is what I'm going to refer to simply as the Silent Hill dimension, since that is what's under discussion here. Now, its relevance to Venom could be how he was brainwashed to become the body double he is, with a great sense of loss of identity. The alarm calls, similar to the air raid sirens the series is known for, as well as how he feels nauseous as the world spins around, similar to the world turning to the Silent Hill dimension. This is then followed by the repeat of Get Out of My Mind, reflecting how Jareth feels in this hellscape. As far as I can tell, there's not much to talk about in regards to the lyrics of Low Roar's song, Low Roar, on the album Low Roar, other than its redundancy and the fact that it's the only instance of 3 of something in their music titles. Aside from this, the lyrics could be alluding to a possibility of Hader reprising his role as Solid Snake or the true Saladin, in the same room no less. Not much else here unless I find something weird with the audio. In the meantime, moving along. Friends Make Garbage, Good Friends Take It Out isn't just good insight into some of the more inconvenient facts of life, it also seems to bear some resemblance to our theories. Not that that should surprise you. Do you think I would have written about it if it held no promise of any speculation? No? To be honest, this one's going to be one of the weaker points at times, but I want to present any thoughts that I have had with Chef Umaril, for you guys to try and join in the discussion. Anyway, the involuntary nature of being dragged along in the first stanza is similar to Venom being brainwashed and going through the motions of Big Boss, whether he ultimately wants to or not at this point, as it's what he thinks he wants. It also comes off as Kojima nodding to the audience saying, yes, your emotions are under my control. I run this roller coaster, bitch. The second stanza could be talking about location scouting, but it also sounds to me like when Kaz and Big Boss were first starting their mother base, not really having much of a sense of direction of what they really wanted to do when starting up. Then, a man from the KGB undercover as a teacher gives Boss an oil rig, which Kaz then converts into their new mother base. The following stanza isn't as easy to attempt to interpret, but a few shots in the dark are that idolizing Kojima or any developer, or the games that they work on, are the death of good games, because ultimately you're expecting more than they can ever hope to achieve. It could also be a reference to being careful who you trust, as all the work you built up over years can be brought down in an instant. The last three stanzas seem to possibly be alluding to Venom being killed by Solid Snake, as it should probably go down. It almost reads like Venom talking about missing quiet in his last moments of life, considering a fling between them was heavily hinted at in the Phantom Pain, between the shower scene and the puddle scene. The painter's lyrics hold some resemblance more to the situation rather than any games. The mention of asking friends for ideas because he's run out of ideas appears to be hinting at collaborating with Jordan Vogt-Roberts, Neil Blomkamp, and Guillermo del Toro. Well, this and the flag patch on Jordan's jacket during the interview with him and Kojima. The following two stanzas are eerie, almost like he's talking to them about his plan for the ruse. The next two stanzas seem to be further hinting to dig into the meat, while also addressing the less open-minded shutting our theories down. Last but not least, a repeat of the third and fourth stanzas. Another case of history repeating itself? I wouldn't normally say that. If you think of it in these terms, the first instance of what's stopping us is Kojima pulling the Phantom Pain ruse. Then the second instance is the Konami ruse. With the context of this possible interpretation, it makes sense to me, to a degree. The next song on the chopping block is Help Me. The first line reminds me of PT and looping through the apartment in Jareth's hellscape. The second and third lines are making me think heavily of PythonSelkan's connection between PT and Death Stranding, as well as the possibility of cannibalism mentioned earlier. I'd also have to guess that the repeating of Help Me Out is significant to a reference to the multiplayer aspects of Death Stranding, working together on and off the game to figure out puzzles. The double What's Left to Talk About also reminds me of the Phantom Pain left by MGS5. It could, however, be hinting that Death Stranding has a few tricks up its sleeve regarding content delivery, as we are seeing with MGS5. Rolling over to Rolling Over.
I'm so funny, please shoot me, please!
Anyway, Rolling Over seems to be alluding to MGS5 and where it may go. The first stanza seems to be hinting that ultimately Big Boss or Cypher, whomever, is unable to control Venom. The second stanza seems to be hinting at Big Boss coming out of hiding, which would make more sense if the first stanza is talking about Big Boss. The final two stanzas seem to be hoping that Venom will die of his own accord, either from Solid Snake's hand or his own hubris. We're going to skip a few songs because I had trouble interpreting them. Moving on to Tonight, 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 the final song on Low Roar's self-titled album, there's a lot to talk about here. Washing off the blood might be referring to Kojima's creative adjustments to the Metal Gear canon to improve quality. There's certain aspects I agree with, but I feel he should be focusing on making it all make sense, not rewriting history. I've tried to give you what you want. What is it that you want? It sounds like a direct response to fans being disappointed with the results of the creator, not fulfilling his promises of filling in the gaps in plot satisfactorily, while completely ignoring that a lot of good storytelling is in the unexplained mysteries. Days spent with not a word to say? Routine red lie? But I ain't gonna be here too long, no I ain't gonna be here too long. We've become so good at fooling all, so good we often fool ourselves. This seems to be a precursor to I'm taking everyone out for a ride, I promise it won't take long, with a bit of patting themselves on the back for creating possibly the most elaborate hoax of all time, at least in gaming. We think twice and always turn around a comfortable frown, so jump but sit and burn a lie, there's no wrong, no right. Double think much?
2 + 2 = 5.
Finally, we move on to the most recent album by Low Roar, Once in a Long, Long While, released this year. Starting out with Don't Be So Serious, this is another song that seems to be more alluding to the ruse rather than to any of the games. The first three stanzas seem like very clear summations of what Kojima has had to do to pull this off. Another moment of doublethink. Shut my eyes, I'm not here, there must be some mistake. That almost sounds like a line out of The Invention of Lying or Orwell's Playbook for Manipulating the Masses, 1984. Watch our words turn to dust. Don't believe the news. As we forge, as we move on, just like most people did regarding MGS5's release from Joaquin Mogren, or that Guerrilla and Kojima go way back.
We go way back.
Still, I refuse to let you slip away, seemingly resembling their fans not letting those theories go, as they shouldn't. Moving right along, Bones doesn't entirely appear to be a song relating to these theories, but there are certain things about it that seem to be hinting at clues for MGS5. The first stanza mentions March, which is the third month of the year. The later song, Waiting 10 Years, mentions 9 months waiting. Add 9 months to 9 years, and 3 months, you've got 10 years. On top of this, there's also a couple of lines that are designed as love song lyrics, but are also reminiscent of something from MGS5. Because you're a part of me and I'm a part of you.
We can change the world and with it the future. I am you and you are me. Carry that with you wherever you go. Thank you, my friend.
Also, I know your voice, I know your face, this is something I cannot replace. Give me hope and give me doubt. Well, I loved you then, but I don't love you now. I am a long way from home. This song seems to be either the end of the relationship between Venom and Quiet, or the beginning of the conflict with Big Boss. But it's definitely closer to Venom and Big Boss because they share the same face and now personality. And even with the shower scene, Quiet and Venom never actually do anything. There's definitely hints that something's going on, it just hasn't yet. Moving on, Sankt Eric's plan is interesting for a number of reasons, mostly because it's another excuse for me to do some research on something. Sankt Eric's plan is a square in Vasastaden, Stockholm, which is located in Sweden. Also, side note, the name Sankt Eric's plan means St. Eric's Plaza. It's also home to a train station. This is noteworthy because the deep voice saying "don't listen to the news, they are already under their control" is speaking Swedish. Anyway, overall this song makes me think of Venom. Controlled by the phone, V has come too. Remember that in the intro, / the truth? That was a Cypher or the Patriots agent letting Zero know that Venom has woke out of his coma. The second stanza, continued through, makes me think of Venom's perception of him and Big Boss, as well as his newfound taste for blood. The third stanza sounds like a continuation of the second, but also sounds like the fans to Kojima and the Ruse. The final stanza might be Kojima's projection of what may happen if things go wrong after the reveal. People just not giving a shit. It also still fits the concept of continuing from stanza 2. Also, down in a hole, I stay where I'm told, waiting to hear, leading up to controlled by the phone, adds to that first thought I had. The darkness of Venom's coma / brainwashing via intense microgogia being that hole he's in. 9 years sounds like a reasonable amount of time to need to make someone believe that they shared the same 40 plus years of history as someone else. That and coming onto the world stage when he was needed. Now that Venom knows who he is it time? Moving right along. My favorite song on the album, Give Me an Answer. The title alone is enough to make you ask questions. PythonSelkan already covered the music video and lyrics, but I will be talking about things that he didn't mention, as I had the idea for this video prior to his video, with a lot more interpretations than he presented. First of all, look at the number on the door as it closes in the beginning. You can see that the number on the door is 0, as PythonSelkan mentioned, which also alludes that it is a room that does not exist. However, in the intro, it specifically reminds me of the icon for the wormhole device in MGS5, hinting that the gap in the door to the bathroom is a separate reality in the video, as well as yet another connection to the wormhole conspiracy. Also, this came out only a few days before the first patch we discussed earlier, the one including Ocelot as an option in FOB infiltration. It also switched from red as they entered and blue as the last two left. Plus, the device on the shower looks suspiciously like what was hooked up to the tank in Death Stranding's second teaser, along with the tar-like liquid that covers the first guy and the girl mentioned by PythonSelkan to potentially be the fluid that conducts these wormholes, or perhaps is a residue left by the wormholes. There were 3 people who walked into the hotel room and gave me an answer, right? One in the car? Well, there are only 3 actors listed in the video description. The driver is the same as the first guy to go into the bathroom. He's also the singer of Low Roar, Karazia. The 2 characters may look slightly different, but it's just the hair. They're not seen in a single scene simultaneously, and their hair lengths are different, so they probably shot at different times to pull it off. I'm taking everyone out for a ride, I promise it won't take long. It's such a silly disguise that you're hiding behind, but don't take it wrong. I know the time and the space that you need, it's blurry but I'll get on. It's getting hard to tell day from a day, just say it and I'll move on. Give me an answer. Sounds like Kojima projecting from the fan perspective. The simple response would make it okay, it's filekeeper work do you want? I keep running to faces and places, remind me of who you are. That last line before further repeat of give me an answer sounds like a hint to dig through files. Faces and Places also strongly hints at the jacket that Jordan Vogt Roberts was wearing during the interview with him and Kojima at E3, which has 3 flags: Japan, America, and Africa. Kojima, Jordan, and Neil Blomkamp. The mention of filekeeper work also makes me think of the 2 Kojima productions. I wanted to find some significance to the part where they draw straws with what appears to be licorice, but I have no clue. I tried using Google Translate's handwriting mode for Japanese, but the only thing that came up was reno, like renovate. Anyway, moving on. I mentioned waiting 10 years earlier, and how Bones mentions March and this song mentions 9 months, 9 plus 3 months is a year, 1 plus 9 years is 10 years, so I'm putting together that we may be seeing up to over a year into Venom's reign as Big Boss. The first stanza could be Quiet's perspective on coming back to Mother Base, or Venom to Big Boss since Venom trained to be as much like him as possible. The second stanza's mention of a face is possibly in reference to the fact that Venom no longer has his own face. It also could be a reference to the insanity building in Venom, becoming the insane Grey Fox we all know and love. This makes sense considering he went as far as to change his name to forget the old identity he thought he had, furthering his loss of identity. Without You, to me, almost screams this song is actually clues. The first stanza seems to be hinting that Venom and Big Boss do indeed meet in Chapter 3. The second stanza is Quiet seeing this and realizing that Venom is, in fact, not Big Boss, the man she thought she loved. The final stanza seems to be Venom fighting Big Boss, possibly after Quiet, Ocelot, or Kaz leave. It also might be a reference to Jareth seeing a ghost of himself from another dimension, his sins, and struggling to keep on without his wife and child. Next up is Gojo, which is Polish for baby. The first 3 stanzas appear to be referencing Venom's loss of limbs, the ashes of the soldiers he had to bomb, and the bygone era of MSF. Making way for the era of Diamond Dogs, and soon, Outer Heaven. It might also be alluding to Venom turning on Big Boss from Jack's perspective. The next 4 stanzas are possibly alluding to a future relationship between Venom and Quiet, if she comes back, unless you had the butterfly logo equipped to avoid her disappearance. 3 songs left. Holy hell, this script is so long by comparison to my standard length videos. Anyway, once in a long while definitely seem to be pointing more toward PT, Death Stranding, Silent Hills, and oddly enough, Metal Gear Survive. There are 3 lines right off the bat that are screaming these themes. You end up in a town, like in Silent Hill. The sky is looking back at you, like the figures in the first Death Stranding trailer hovering in the air over Norman Reedus, and the lights rain down like the light shafts in Metal Gear Survive. You can find more context for that in PythonSelkan's video on Metal Gear Survive, possibly taking place in an underwater dimension. The second stanza could possibly be alluding to Reedus, Jordan Vogt Roberts, Neil Blomkamp, and Del Toro teaming up with Kojima. It could also be Ocelot helping Venom in his fight against Big Boss, which makes more sense considering Ocelot being the triple crosser he is. The second to last stanza seems to be partly a vague reference to Quiet, with the mention of the woman of your dreams. It also seems to be referencing Death Stranding, the fault between the trees being a split in the reality/timeline. It could also be the struggle with reality both Venom and Jareth face from their respective situations. Poznan is interesting. The title means to get to know, so it's probably Kojima making the hint that there's more to know, especially considering the following lyrics. And if we ever broke these walls down, it's easier said than done. Would I be crazy enough to follow, or let regret eat me up? Sounds to me like fans having their theories shot down by peers while trying to take down their ruse. The final stanza seems to be leading to the idea of the denial of peers, or lying about your true feelings until the ruse is revealed to your peers to avoid being mocked. Miserably, the final song on the album seems to be pointing to Venom fucking up badly because he was too intensely focused on something and neglected quiet in a time of need, perhaps during a raid on Mother Base. That or another reference to her realizing that he isn't Big Boss. If she comes back, it's possible that she found a cure or is making a deal with Zero for a cure since the virus was engineered by Cypher anyway. Thus, Venom and her get together, Venom then tries to kill Big Boss, driving her away for the final time. We're done? We're done! Holy crap, thank you guys for watching. This video was a mountain to climb, but I'm glad I made it, and I'm glad you guys made it with me. Thanks particularly to PythonSelkan. If it weren't for their videos, I wouldn't have gotten interested in digging for clues about Kojima's next project. If you liked the video, make sure to give it a thumbs up. I assume you already gave it a thumbs down if you didn't. Please consider subscribing. I don't always make discussion videos or theory videos like this, but I will be making more. I also have a rather varied channel, so if you're a gamer, it's possible that you'll find something that you like. Anyway guys, until next time, this is RetroHellspawn, signing off.
Fuck.